Instead, what happened was that I fell in love again with things didn't realize I had fallen out of love with. My motivation came back, my health came back, my ability to stick with stuff came back, my creativity came back like in unexpected ways, and ideas started coming to me, especially once I started understanding the rhythm of reward and I looked into this system. Because as soon as this happened, I said, what happened? How is it that I went from loving something so much that I wanted it all of the time? It was consuming my brain power so much, either trying to not do it or working my way off because working my way, basically overworking to compensate for the bad things I was doing on the weekends or at night. And it was just this mess of things. So how could I go from loving something so much to literally not caring about it at all?
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Building Scale, specifically the Building Connections series, where I get to talk to people that I meet here in the Valley through all kinds of different ways. And shout out to Shelly Bryant, who introduced me to Michelle Rutkowski, who is the person that I have an amazing conversation with today. She shares her journey into architecture, discusses the early passion for it, as well as her evolution with the firm, and then dives into this concept of the reward system and explains how dopamine and motivation transformed not only her professional life, but also her personal life. And she tells these amazing stories, and she outlines the 4 pillars of reward, which is connection, discovery, movement, and rest. And then how she emphasizes the importance of designing spaces that foster those elements kind of across the board, and how you actually enhance well-being. It's super impactful discussion. When I had somebody doing the clips for the show, they were like, oh my God, this episode is so fire, which I was then also excited that somebody said it was fire, because that's what the kids say. Nonetheless, really, really excited to have this episode out and get to share this amazing discussion that I had with Michelle with you. And I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. So here's Michelle Rutkowski from MOR Studios and talking about the reward system. So Michelle, I don't know if I've actually asked you this, because we've talked so much about reward system, purpose, all that amazing stuff that you're doing.
Yeah.
Why did you get into architecture? Like, why own a firm? Like, why go down that path?
Well, yeah, architecture was always part of the plan as far back as I remember. So when I was in second grade, I was an artist and I was also good at math. And so my parents said, well, I've got the plan for you, so you're not a starving artist. And they said, go into architecture school. And so, yeah, I mean, I was from a very young age, very focused on that. I dropped out of high school, not dropped out. Oh my gosh, it made it sound like I dropped out. I actually transferred to the community college to take credits for architecture so I could get ahead of the game. In fact, I just pulled out the first section I ever drew at 17 years old the other day when I was cleaning out my office. And I had drawn a little puppy in the section. It was, yeah. But back when there was blueprints. So I actually did run blueprints through the machine and did all of that. I found my first set of drawings. So I think I've been an architect, my whole life, it feels like, but that was
From
always
the beginning,
yes.
grade 2. Also,
Grade 2.
yeah, didn't drop out, went to community college. Very
Very different
things. Because I was
but
like, holy shit, we got a big story to tell. Let's get down to this.
There's actually quite a story behind that, but I just don't know if I should tell it on this format. But yes, yes, I did. So when I went to community college, there was also a little blow up around my house, and they were like, honey, it's time for you to grow up. And they basically said, you got to get out of the house. And it was a win-win for everybody. So it was just a very good thing. And I got to go to community college, which was very nice. And my parents and I stayed in touch and in very good relationship because of the move. So it was all a good thing. But at the time, it felt a little dramatic for me to move out at 17 and go to the community college and start my architecture life.
Wow, that's very intriguing. I will dig into those stories maybe another time. But
over some sort of bonfire somewhere.
Yes,
I don't know,
that sounds great.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing. So always been an architect at heart. So love design, right? Like that is so that you could have done that anywhere though. Like you could have gone to an architect firm and just wrote out your years there
Hmm.
doing that. Why go and do your own thing? Like why build more?
Well, at that time, it was a matter of I was at my firm 14 years, and I loved it. I loved it. I was in a really good spot, but at the same time, I had gotten burnt out and overwhelmed by all of the pressures of life. I was having our third kiddo at the time, and so I really thought that I would take a back seat to architecture and just design my life. But what happened was about a year in, it was clear that it wasn't working out exactly how I had planned. And it just felt like my husband and I were on different pages. I loved architecture, and I needed a break, I think, ultimately. And so walking away and having our third kiddo, and we renovated this house during that time. So I was pretty busy. And about a year into that, I knew I needed to solve something. And it's actually in the middle of the night when I woke up and I said I was going to start MOR Studio. The name came to me, the whole thing, at 3 a.m. And I said, that's it. I'm going to have a firm that flexes with the seasons of my life so that I can still do what I love and grow and flex it based on what I could put into my life. And that was before COVID. So it was not as, now there's so much more flexibility built into our work-life balance.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a nice opportunity to, and I thought I was going to be by myself for a while, thinking that was the most flexible way to be. But it turns out that was not at all what was the best plan. The best plan was to grow with the right people. Ultimately, COVID forced me to do that. So I really started to think about how to grow a firm that was flexible, and flexible for the people that were on the staff too, because everybody on our team has different life requirements, like everybody
Sure.
does. And so
Yep.
we all have this kind of flexible but really intentional approach to how we're doing architecture.
This reminds me, I need to introduce you to Amanda from Think Lab, who was just on the podcast. I don't know, a
Hmm.
few weeks ago. Very similar. So many similarities crossover
Yeah.
there. Exciting. Yeah, it's just wow. Okay, well, I'm glad I
Yeah.
asked about the architecture firm because
Right. So yeah,
what
now 8 years in, I'm in a season where I can really dig into the business a little more, and I've got just such a great team. So it's been a very cool crescendo, I guess, of fun along the way, and an adventure. I started off doing projects that were well, I had come from a big project background, doing large scale municipal work and projects that had big budgets and project managers that were experienced. And then when I went on my own, I just started running into a lot of different types of projects that weren't quite what I was expecting. And so
Mhm.
along the way, it just was a great learning experience to start from scratch and to really dig into some of the clients that needed more education along the way. And we've kind of built a practice now around, well, I hate to say this, but complex projects sometimes come our way. And yeah, so it's been fun though, just getting to do more and more of what we love along the journey. And now we're in a really good spot.
Yeah, a good spot that allows you to think about reward systems, which is literally when
Yes,
we first talked
I know.
was this,
Totally new adventure.
which is hilarious now that I think about it. I'm like, we've interacted multiple times, and actually, I've not asked about the architecture firm all that much, other than like,
I know.
how does this mindset that you have, which we're about to talk about, goes into it. But other than that, like, I've not asked about it. So now, silly on me for not
Hmm.
thinking about asking. But with that said, so you have I don't know, what do you call this? A philosophy, a theory, a framework, a belief, a
Hmm.
research, whatever you want to call this, about reward systems and like
Hmm.
how we as biologically are built a way that then impacts our entire life, including the spaces that we are in. So I'd love for
Yes.
you to give a little bit more color on that because I'm not doing it justice as I'm trying to explain it.
Yeah. Well, no, it's been the last 4 years I've been exploring this concept, and ultimately how it's changed everything for me. It's changed how my family runs, my business runs, and how we design spaces. So it really has made a big difference. And it started with addiction in my life. And so what happened was, and the reason why I have to tell this story is it really just doesn't make sense otherwise, unless I give you the foundation of why I dug into this in the first place. But yeah, it was after COVID and I was trying to cut back and I could not seem to do it. I felt like I was in a really dangerous spot and I started researching what was going on. And ultimately, I came across a solution that was called the Sinclair method for alcohol use disorder. And I heard it on a podcast, which is wonderful because when I started understanding that I had this issue, I did what I typically do, which is just like try to control it. And I'm in control. I'm going to figure this thing out. But holy cow, was it harder than I had ever expected. I was not in control like I thought I was. And so ultimately, I tried this method, which sounded very interesting to me. It was the only thing I knew about it was it's going to block your dopamine, and that was going to retrain my brain into not liking alcohol. And so
All
I
right.
thought that sounds interesting, but ultimately, what happened was completely unexpected. I had thought that what was going to happen was that I was going to, I don't know, I guess take the pill and then eventually I would just not like alcohol, but I didn't think anything else was going to get better necessarily. I thought it was going to be like the times I wasn't drinking, which was like kind of fun, but I was like, I will do that because I wanted to live ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really thought that this was worth trying. But what happened was not that. Instead, what happened was that I fell in love again with things I had didn't realize I had fallen out of love with. My motivation came back, my health came back, my ability to stick with stuff came back, my creativity came back like in unexpected ways, and ideas started coming to me, especially once I started understanding the rhythm of reward and I looked into this system. Because as soon as this happened, I said, what happened? How is it that I went from loving something so much that I wanted it all of the time? It was consuming my brain power so much, either trying to not do it or working my way off because I working my way basically overworking to compensate for the bad things I was doing on the weekends or at night. And it was just this mess of things. So how could I go from loving something so much to literally not caring about it at all? What had happened in my brain and what was this system that had come back online? And ever since then, I've been uncovering the reward loop and how we get addicted to things in the first place, and understanding that this system that has been miscategorized as something for pain and addiction is really something that drives our motivation. It drives our purpose and our values. And when you really care for this system and give it the things that it's designed to get to strengthen it, which is connection, discovery, movement, and rest. When you give it those four ingredients, you can strengthen it and really come out with a system that's robust and resilient against addiction. Because what we found is that this world is hijacking our reward system all the time, from our
Yeah.
notifications to everything that we're up against. We are constantly in the business of having people come at our attention and trying to get us to consume. And then also our screens, which are with us all the time. So when I started researching the reward loop, it really just opened up a brand new world of information for me. And I understood that I needed to change a few things. All good though. What's weird is like it didn't require any willpower because the system also is responsible for willpower. So yeah, it's just been amazing. I don't know if you want to have any more questions in there. What
Yes.
about
No.
that was unclear because there's still more to come.
So you dive into this idea of this reward system
Hmm.
and the cycle, what you said. Let's walk through that a little bit. Like, where does this start? And where
Hmm.
does it, like, what's the next thing and what's the
Okay.
next thing and how does it cycle through your being or your brain or wherever
Yeah.
this is
So
existence?
first I had to understand dopamine, and that dopamine was the first thing I thought about because what I was told is it blocks dopamine. And I had always heard in my life that dopamine was something that I don't know, was a little bit like the pleasure molecule or something to
Mm-hmm.
avoid. But when I really understood dopamine, dopamine is nothing of that sort when it's used for its true intention, which is for movement, for progress, any goal-directed behavior, for cognitive function, for your sleep and your memory. Dopamine is responsible for so much. So I understood right away that that was miscategorized, that I needed to understand where dopamine was firing in my life. And so that was one of the first things I did was say, okay, look at my life and say, what was dopamine firing towards and what
Mm-hmm.
was it not? And how you can feel dopamine. It might help if I told you the story about when I first felt dopamine in its absence, which was kind of weird because at first when I started taking the pill and I would drink, because one of the things that the instructions that the doctor gave me was to take the pill and drink during the blockade, but when you're not on the blockade, do all the other things that you want to do more of, whether it's moving your body or exercising or eating healthy, do those things outside of the blockade, because that means that you're going to want to do them more. And so that was the first clue that I had into that the system was plastic and trainable, because what I had heard was like, once an addict, always an addict. There's no help for you. Like that's the message I got from culture. But once I understood the system, I understood that dopamine could be directed and that we had an opportunity to intersect where dopamine was landing in our life. And so I ultimately looked at everywhere. If I took out every synthetic reward, whether it was, all of our synthetics, I don't need to mention them all. We all know what they are, the hangups of the modern world that give us instant endorphin kicks. When we take those all away, anything synthetic, we're left with these pillars of reward strength that really we need to have a regular diet of in order to strengthen these systems. And I sorted out the knowledge and the science to come up with these 4 pillars, which is connection. That's oxytocin signaling, and
Mm-hmm.
how when we connect with people, it actually establishes this synchronicity of reward. And so connection heals. Eye contact and conversations can heal people because the reward system is actually connected to so many other things. So we already are hearing that oxytocin heals, but it's also what keeps us connected to things. So yeah, and then discovery. So discovering new things, uncovering new adventures, making sure things stay new and novel. Those are all things that this system is designed to do. It's designed for novelty, but we have novelty at our fingertips. So where we get our novelty is important, and how we strategically integrate that into our lives. And then movement. So movement is such a critical part of this reward system loop. And that is that when we move our bodies, there's a cascade of benefits for cognition and for our reward signaling that keeps us coming back to those behaviors. But we really need to move in joy. And what I had always thought about movement before was that it was also punishment for what we did on the weekends for over consuming. But it's like, no, that's not really the purpose of the system. The system is to get us moving in rhythm and joy, and then having cycles of rest. So the 4th pillar is rest, but it's not just the rest we get at night, it's the rest that we get during the day in quiet moments of stillness, in letting our minds wander. And one of the key pieces of all this is connection to nature. So biophilia, natural circadian rhythm signaling, all these things go into strengthening our reward system loops and keeping us engaged in life. Because when you understand the molecules of motivation, those are dopamine and endorphins, you know how to make motivation happen. That's been kind of, it's like the ingredients of motivation. They don't just come out of thin air. They're built with intention and rhythm. And so we all need to understand what these rhythms are. And I realized I needed to tell my kids about this, that they have these systems that can be hijacked. I realized I needed to tell the world about it, because there's a lot of stigma behind this system, and there's silos around this system because people, I guess, don't want to talk about the fact that we can be hijacked. And then there's, for our communities, we need to understand that we need to make places for connection, discovery, movement, and rest. And ultimately that translated into my work, because I realize that the spaces that we create can foster these things and create healthy environments that people want to come back to. Because that's ultimately, what better than to understand the science of motivation, to understand what motivates people to stay connected to places and people and programs.
When we talked about this the first time, I was like, I have not ever done the digging in upon why, when I wake up in the morning and take a walk, why is
Mm-hmm.
that day better than days that I don't do that? Right. Like it's
Yes.
just, but like when you start doing certain habits or certain tasks
Mm-hmm.
or certain things you do, if you do them enough, you start realizing, man, this is good. Your body
Yeah.
starts like just naturally doing it. So then when you went through these with me, I was like, oh, that
Yeah.
seems to make sense. Like I've not thought through, oh, what's happening in my brain
Mm-hmm.
necessarily for this, but very true. And you mentioned connection, which
Mm-hmm.
I have been told I'm fairly good connecting
Yeah.
with people. Like
Yes,
that
you
is
are.
something I've been told that I'm good at. I frequently say, like, did I get a hug when I meet the person in person if I've only met them digitally? Then I probably did a good job connecting with them, right? Like that's
Yes.
just in
Yes,
general. Which
exactly.
actually, owner of an architecture firm that I met for the first time in a different state. So I walked into his office and we gave a hug to each other, and it was just like very like, oh yeah, like I must have done something right in this
Yes.
regard to be
Yeah.
connected. Which for me, I love people, so like inherently it builds on itself, right? So
Mm-hmm.
all of these aspects that you went through, I was like, well, these make perfect sense. Or rest,
Hmm.
like the times that like I've gone through certainly plenty of times in my life where it's like I'm just head down, let me just work
Hmm.
hardcore, like COVID, like for
Yes.
me, like especially at first, it was like nonstop, just grind. And it was like, this is not healthy at all. Like, this is
Yeah.
horrible. And then, like, I'm actually going to take a couple walks during the day. Then
Hmm.
it's like, oh, those days are inherently more productive, even though it's like,
Yeah.
but you're working less time. But it's like, yeah, but the time that I am working, I am way more engaged, which changes
Exactly.
the whole thing.
Yeah.
I'm a unofficial case study for you
Yes.
that like what you're talking about is absolutely true.
Yeah. I think a lot of us felt that way after COVID. And, I think I've gotten a lot of clues along the way. And the time and experience during COVID was one of those times when we did, in our family, we had to change everything because we had 3 kids at home. They were young and we were doing the homeschool thing and everything had to change. But it didn't make me realize that there are some rhythms that we can establish to make these things better. We suddenly all got faced with the same question mark, like, what do we do with our days if we're not going to leave this house? How do we structure things in a way that makes sense? And ultimately, I found that yes, I'm way more productive when this system is online. And so I can now understand exactly the biology of why. And I understand now that when we do these things, especially when we're connecting with others, we're actually helping their reward system signal, which means they're getting some positive feedback in their biology, which ultimately leads to wellness and well-being for those people. So we're all doing good when we can, strike up a conversation with the stranger sometimes. And in our meetings, just making sure our teams are feeling connected to each other is such an important thing. If you want an engaged team, connection cannot be an afterthought.
Yeah. I'm a huge believer in that.
Yeah.
You mentioned them being online, the systems being online. Does that mean they go on and offline? Like, what is that? How
Yeah.
does that work?
Well, they're always working for us. So I'll tell you a little bit about the reward loop too, because I know you asked about that. And I think it's helpful to understand this piece of it, but they're always working for us. No matter what, you cannot turn your reward system off.
Okay.
So they're always online, but they're built based on what we put into that as inputs. And so it starts with a cue. So imagine you have a box that's a gift and you see it. That's the cue that something is special inside the box. And you get a little sense of dopamine when you see a present. And that little sense of anticipation. I was going to tell you the story about when dopamine wasn't there. So let me tell you about the reward loop. Then I'll tell you about when dopamine wasn't there for me when I first acknowledged it. So the reward loop starts with this cue, this gift, and that gives you a sense of forward motion. It says you want to go and do something about this. That sense of forward motion, you don't move forward at all. If your dopamine signals are blocked, you do not move, period. Like this is part of it. So you have to move forward, you have to open the gift, and inside the gift is something that is a reward. Right now it could be something terrible in the gift, but most of the time when we experience a gift that's wrapped like a beautiful present, we experience something lovely inside that we want.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah, totally.
so we open the gift and then we imagine inside the gift is this bite of as a beautiful chocolate, your favorite kind of chocolate, maybe a few different options of chocolate, and you pick out your favorite one and you take a bite, and there's kind of a warmth in your palate, your body kind of relaxes a little bit. Those chocolate is perfectly synchronized to our reward loop with the fat and the sugar. And so if you can get a sense of how that feeling might feel, that sense of like warmth, and when you love chocolate, if you love chocolate, if you're
Yeah.
human, if you love chocolate, then you know how this feels. That's when that system starts to play. And so there's endorphins that happen. Those endorphins land on mu opioid receptors. And what they do is that those mu opioid receptors basically signal another wave of dopamine through some other methods, but I don't need to get into the super detail on that. But there's another wave of dopamine that signals that makes us keep wanting to do that. And it solidifies in our memory what we want to come back to. So now, since we experienced that reward, we're always going to see a present and we're going to keep reinforcing that message that that present is somewhere we find joy. And then the last part of this step is that our RAS, our reticular activating system, will, based on where we install those templates. So basically, those are templates for what we want to come back to. Our RAS will filter out our environment to find the most important bits of information to show to our conscious brain. And that basically will direct us to the signal of going back to where we've installed our memories. So what's fascinating about this is that we have a little bit of control. We have a lot of control I'm underselling it. This reward system is an incredibly powerful system that we have more control of over than we imagine. Because what we can do is we can install emotive visions into this system through visioning and intentionality. We can say, I am going to imagine myself in a successful position in whatever we're doing, or imagine the vision of where we're headed. And if we install that with enough emotive resonance, your brain can't tell the difference. And what happens is your RAS, which is Mr. RAS, who we call it in my presentations, he will filter out like a bouncer the most important bits of information and give them to your conscious brain to say, this is what's most important. Come back to it all the time. And so when I took naltrexone, which is part of the Sinclair method, it actually put a little pillow on top of my mu opioid receptors for a 6 to 8 hour window, depending on the dose and your doctor's prescription. That's what it will do. And it will put a little pillow on that. And in doing that, your receptor is protected. So when I was drinking, I was agonizing this receptor over and over again, telling my brain that's where you want to come back to over and over again. And so the receptor downregulated and became desensitized to the regular gifts of life: connection, discovery, movement, and rest. So I wasn't able to receive those signals the same way because my receptors were compromised and they needed healing. This is biological system. So by protecting those receptors, they came back online. And I understood what really happened in my body is that they basically gained strength again. And so by the time I was done with alcohol and the pill, I was able to feel alive again. And so I'll just tell you about the first time when I really got the sense of dopamine, if you're interested in that
Oh yeah.
story. Okay. So it was like a week into this experiment. Cause at that point I was like, if it doesn't work, I'm going back to drinking. I did not want to quit drinking at that time. And I didn't tell anyone but my husband, but it was about 2 weeks in. I felt like I had a little bit of a superpower when I went to events, but I was on my way home one night and I stopped at Target and got some M&Ms, and I had already taken the pill because I was just following the same routine. Like the doctor said, take the pill, and I would take it before I got home and I would still have my wine at night. And so I had picked up a pack of M's and got into the car, and I was on the blockade. And so I tasted the first M, and it tasted delicious, like in my mouth, but
Mm-hmm.
it was the second. So I was still excited about getting the first set of like the dopamine was still there to get me to open the M's and to get me to put them in my mouth. But it was the second round of dopamine. It was the mu opioid receptors that were blocked that didn't burst that second round of dopamine, which I felt the absence of that for the first time in my brain. I was like, where is that? Wait a second. Like, now I get it. Now I get what that feeling is. And I could kind of identify it. And that was really helpful for me to understand, where our brain was firing. And it turns out this system is incredibly plastic, and that none of us are stuck or broken beyond repair, that there's really some incredible things that we're finding in neuroscience that give hope to a lot of people.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So you're taking these dopamine blockers,
Hmm.
right? So you're taking that.
Essentially,
So
yeah. I mean,
then anything you did in that whatever that window of time, you
yeah.
wouldn't get the second pop of dopamine, right? Like that's
Right,
essentially
right.
what is happening.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. So I wasn't encouraged to keep going on that cycle. And so it wasn't installing in my memory anymore that that was the place to go back to. And so because it was an intentional timing, which is part of the Sinclair methodology, it was basically around the time of drinking, so that eventually I just stopped caring about alcohol, which was profound. It was like an
How
unaddiction way an
so how
addiction.
long how long so you start this process.
Hmm.
How long until you're like, "Oh, I don't think about wine
Yeah.
anymore." Or
I
I
remember the
I no
day
longer have the
actually.
dopamine pop anymore.
Hmm. Um, yeah, for a while, I almost couldn't tell. It's almost a subtle thing that happens in your body, almost like addiction happens. Because honestly, all of us, if you understand how susceptible we are to addictions in our lives, like they come up sneaky. The doom scrolling and the stuff. So addiction happened. It creeped up on me kind of sneakily along the years, but in the same way, it kind of snuck out of my life in a way. Like I would leave glasses on the counter and be like, I didn't finish that last night. I just got bored of doing that. And so it was about 8 months in where I really felt like this freedom that was unbelievable. And actually, when I've been reading some books. There's some other a lot of people that have done this method before, and they all feel that sense of freedom at a certain point, and the gratitude of that, because when you feel like you're in chains and then you're like free of it, it's unbelievable the feeling of gratitude I felt for that. So it was about 8 months in, but it happens differently for everyone. This is not medical advice, of course. This is just my
Sure. No.
experience. But
Good
yeah,
point. I
it
want to
was
make
about
sure that we are not suggesting
yeah,
medical advice on the podcast
right.
by any means of
No,
imagination.
absolutely not. It's just this is my experience of how it happened. And ultimately, it isn't about the pill at all. What it's about is understanding the system behind this. What I feel like if I would have been really educated from a young age, I was told from a young age that I was at risk, that it was, it was devastating in my bloodline and in my community.
Hmm.
And so I knew that it was something I should be cautious of, but I thought because I wasn't as exposed to it in childhood that I wouldn't have this problem. But yeah, it's just really important for people to understand this from a young age, that there's these reward loops that can get off track, and that when we really want to strengthen them, we need to give them, it's not just about what you take out of the system, it's about the inputs, the connection, discovery, movement, and rest that can strengthen the system and keep you, and also the emotive visions that you kind of give yourself along the way to make sure that your dopamine fires in the direction you want it to fire. And I knew that I wanted to tell people about this, one, because there's a lot of suffering around this system, and there's billions and billions that are spent on hijacking this system
Hmm.
in industries, the ones,
Oh yeah.
the big ones. And so there's no one standing behind the antidote to the system. So naltrexone is a generic drug, and Sinclair method is not widely known because of that. And so I knew I needed a spokesperson, and I wanted to save lives ultimately. So I knew I wanted to tell people my story. I just had no idea how much it would influence architecture and spaces, and that it was going to be it was going to strengthen my business as well, because it turns out that the spaces we design can equally have an impact on the system. And we really need to build spaces more about the rhythms of our lives, and that people need to know this. So it's fun to have an advocacy message and also be able to tell people about how we can design their spaces to make people want to come back to them by really understanding how the system works.
No, that so uh I've been thinking and talking a lot about distractions lately, right? And
Mm-hmm.
distractions come in all
Yes.
flavors, right? It's like you talked about your phone, you talk about
Mm-hmm.
like alcohol, drugs, or you talk about just like social interaction. Like I
Yeah.
like me, I'm very connected to people, but it's like, but if I do that all the time, I
Mm-hmm.
won't be able to do the bigger things that I'm trying to achieve because it's pulling my time away. You only have so much time, right? So it's just like, and doing that thing, what is the reaction that occurs, right? So it's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I stayed up late and watched TV, which then it means I probably didn't get up very early, which means I
Yeah.
probably didn't have time for a walk, which then it didn't, it's this stacking of like, oh, your one decision that you made that was a distraction from the goals that you have has
Yeah.
now spiraled down, right? So that a lot of that thought process is what I'm hearing of like, yeah, you're just getting this reward system hijacked instead of doing the thing that like, oh man, you would really love this if you would just get the distractions out of the way, right? This is the easiest way to put
Mm-hmm.
it. But when I think of spaces, then
Mm-hmm.
how do you create spaces that touch on these four pillars across the board? Like what has to go through you and the rest of your designers thoughts of saying like, how do we take this idea that
Mm-hmm.
also how did you, maybe the question of like, how did you tell the team this of saying,
Yes.
by the way, we're going all in, let's
Yeah.
let's dive in. So maybe that question
Yeah.
first, but then second, how do you actually design those spaces?
Yeah. So at the same time as I was kind of going through this personal journey of discovery around the system and knowing that I really needed to understand it for my own good, right? And I was going to write this book, but at the same time, we were going through the EOS process at the office.
Love
So
EOS
yes,
company
and
ourselves.
it's a wonderful thing. And Katie is our director of operations, and we really took the time to start thinking about the business and what we wanted it to look like. And ultimately, it fed into each other in a way. And we really decided that we wanted to make a business. Our mission is to craft places for connection, discovery, movement, and rest for thriving and resilient communities. We know that this heals communities, it heals businesses, and it heals families. And so we knew we wanted to tell that. Now, it also, we told the staff. So before I ever like came out to the world, it's just a weird thing. But when you kind of unleash a new brand, they're like, ooh, that's a cool marketing scheme. It's like, it's so much different than that for us. And so for us, it started with just a team of saying, hey, this is what we believe really works to make communities stick together. This is the places that we want to contribute to the world. These are the projects and the people we want projects that really care about the people that are in them, that care about their well-being, and places that feel sticky and resonant and comfortable and connected to nature. We want to make places like this. And so it wasn't hard for the team to come around to that. Like, once you understand the principles of what this is about, it's about making places that are enjoyable, that don't stress us out, that respond to our biology and our natural circadian rhythms, and make sure we have views to nature. And it's not hard to convince people that this is a good thing, because you feel when you're in a space that feels good. And we've kind of gone even beyond the neuro. There's kind of this undercurrent right now of trauma informed design and that, but we believe that every space that we go into should be something that responds to everyone's nervous system and this reward system, and that we can do better with our architecture to make places for rest, for connection. And these are just simple strategies. It's like we're putting art that's textural and makes people want to feel it, or there's light that changes behind the artwork, so there's a sense of novelty when you come back to a place. There's more transparency and connection to the outdoors, and there's more opportunities for connections in different ways. We know that connection happens side to side, face to face, in different seating postures. There's more variety in where we can sit and where we can work during the day, because we know that it's very important for us to have novelty when we want dopamine to fire again. So we're really thinking about what's the most productive and innovative we can make the people in these spaces. And that is for office spaces, but for places like religious sanctuaries, how do we make places where people feel really engaged in worship? It's that we want to make places for rest outside of the worship, for connection outside of the worship space. So it applies to different building types in different ways, but every single client we have wants to build places that people want to come back to. So when you understand the rhythms of rewards and the science behind that, you can really design places that respond to those things and keep endorphin signaling strong, and not stress people out and get them off kilter, but really feel warm and resonant. And there's real ways to do that. The fractals in nature just blow my mind, how healing they can be. And when we look at the science, it's amazing to understand those connections.
When you are going to either when you're bidding out work, or if
Hmm.
you have designed something, when
Yes.
you when whoever if it's the builder or if it's the owner, whoever's gonna be the tenant, whoever's gonna be in the space, like, do you have to explain, like, hey, we did this because of this and this because of this, or is it like they just feel it? Like,
Hmm.
I think I mentioned to you when we talked before that I went to the Clayco office here in Phoenix, and like
Hmm.
it just felt amazing. I
Yeah.
couldn't explain why, like, the different it just felt different.
Hmm.
And I didn't understand why. Now again, it's beautifully done and all of those components, but like they have one corner where it's like you see Camelback, and it's like
Hmm.
there's couches there, and it's just like
Yeah.
such a like it gives you a feeling, right? Like it get in
Yes.
like and I don't work there. I'm not even working there, so I'm not even in it all the time. And it's just like I felt immediately that, like, oh, this feels different. Like,
Hmm.
it was just very much that. So is it I have to explain why we did these things, or is it more like, oh no, you're gonna just feel it because your systems are gonna be like bing 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 bing.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing because it's not just the architecture too. It's the experience even before people get to there. So that's at the Global
Okay,
Ambassador, and
yeah,
I've visited there before, and they'll send you, even before you go, this personalized letter that says, come to the valet, welcome Michelle. Like when I walk in, welcome Michelle. And there's this whole experience of the approach to the building. So we have to understand that what we do in architecture starts before you get out of the car. So from the signage to the way the landscape works, it's not something that we step foot into the building and we're immediately, sometimes that happens, but honestly, the passage from the car to the building can be just as important. And so the programs in the space can be just as important too. If you go back there and work there every day, you're going to feel a little different. So there should be some novelty to the space to make you still feel like you want to come back to it. So maybe some different programs. That's why it's so important when you're looking at retail spaces to make the programmatic element. So a critical part of making a space last is that a space feels really good when it's new, and you will feel that in a beautiful space. But when you go back to it and you want people to work there and come into work every day in the office, that's a different solution. And that
Interesting. Okay.
solution comes through programs, through novelty, through discovery, and through rest and connection. So yeah, it just depends. But I can do a lot with architecture by making spaces feel wonderful and by using new technologies too, like circadian lighting and different postures for the desks. Like we're literally turning desks and saying, no, we need this person to have a transparent view, because when you're in a space, you need to be connected to a space more than 20 feet away every 20 seconds, or every 20 minutes for 20 seconds. That's both for eye health and for cognitive health and for dopamine signaling. So we're trying to get everybody in the office and every time you're inside to have some connection to a lively space beyond the four walls that we're in. So we're think innovatively, but it's a both and thing. And I think the education piece of it is helpful, because then people understand what we're going for, and it's much easier for us to have that conversation along the way. But yeah, the spaces, we design beautiful stuff, so the spaces will automatically feel good, I think. And there's a lot of architects doing just such beautiful work in this area. So I know that they're making spaces that do these things and doing the best they can. But when we can work alongside the occupants of the space and the people running the programs, we can really make places sing once they really understand the logic of this.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. This has been amazing. This has been so much
Yeah,
fun. I can't wait to see you next to ask you more and more questions about
I
this
know
and
there's a
dig in
lot to
deeper and
go.
deeper and deeper. Oh yeah, no,
Yeah,
we've just scratched the surface, which
I
I'm
know,
well
but
aware.
it's been fun. I think we got it all out there, at least all the good stuff.
For sure. So before we say goodbyes, is there a good way if somebody want to get a hold of you that they can do that?
Sure. Yeah, we've got two websites. So MOR Studio is the commercial architecture firm, and we do all kinds of different projects, from corporate to religious to municipal to parks, that sort of thing. And you can see our projects on there. You can also see a little bit about the principles of connection, discovery, movement, and rest on that website. So it's www.morstudio.net. And then you can find me at mydopamineblueprint.com. That's where the advocacy efforts towards the Sinclair method and any resources you may need around the Sinclair method, there's some links on there for anyone who else wants to connect on that. And also, so that's www.mydopamineblueprint.com. And yeah, I hope people just, keep following along. There'll be more opportunities to connect.
No, for sure. Is there anything else you'd like to make sure the people know before you say goodbye?
No, just know that you have these wonderful reward systems, or more systems as we call them. And so just, I hope that everybody who hears this can maybe do a little bit more connection, discovery, movement, and rest in their lives.
A little bit more connection, studio and rest.
Exactly.
Love
You
that.
got it.
Love that.
No more.
That's awesome. Listeners, this has been fascinating for me, very exciting, as you can only imagine and hear in my voice. And until next time, adios.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Building Scale. To help us reach even more people, please share this episode with a friend, a colleague, or on social media.
Remember, the three pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology.
And our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy.
So if you think your company's technology pillar could use some improvement, book a call with us to see how we can help maximize your IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
And until next time,
Keep building scale.
Scale.